Not a single drop of blood, except those that had been stepped in, was disturbed in any way. It was not a bleach cleanup. It did not happen. So that when I see Menini out there saying she cleaned with bleach, I'm saying, you're a lying son of a gun.
Because I mean, we just looked at a picture of a sink that's covered in blood.
Oh, well, that's a sink covered in blood.
You got to go back to that picture.
Let's do that, guys. Can we go back to this?
Look at this. They said that Amanda came home, and her story, which is the truth. She came home after spending the night away, and she saw a clean house, but she couldn't find Meredith, and she said she found a couple of drops of blood in the sink.
And they said this is what the sink
and this
looks
is the
like.
picture they released.
That is after testing. That's when they sprayed it.
That's phenolphthalein.
Yeah, which is naturally that color, and it
so it looks like
it will turn that color after time. So they released this deliberately to make it look like that was a slaughterhouse in the bathroom, and she was lying.
And if you look at the photos of the sink, I saw the photos of the sink as they were going through the murder scene that night. Pristine. I had trouble in their photos finding the drops of blood. It was a complete sham. You know that receipt for the bleach that they said they had? It was never entered in trial in 4 years.
It doesn't exist.
It never happened.
So if the prosecutor is allowed to make a statement like this publicly to the world, which is completely unsupported by the evidence, and he would first have his case thrown out of court, and then he would be prosecuted for the crimes that he committed in trying to set this defendant up. It doesn't happen here because in Italy, the prosecutors have the status of judges. They don't have anybody reviewing what they're doing, and they basically have the freedom to say and do whatever they want during the investigation, during the trial, and post-trial. Tell them what happened when you
know, he was indicted. He was indicted prior to Amanda's thing, even under that system.
Who are we talking about?
Menini was under indictment for malfeasance in his previous case,
which was
the Monster Flores case,
where he did illegal wiretaps, he imprisoned people, he threatened people, like 21 innocent people.
Well, let me just take a moment where we're going to talk a little bit about Magnini, but also, guys, could you put a
when I look at that crime scene, and when I look at that crime scene, I saw a very organized burglary, but a very disorganized murder and rape. And the crime scene that was left afterwards indicates that disorganization to the max.
Okay, well,
John Douglas, but John Douglas looked at it, and he talks about it in the book, and he came to the same conclusions. Steve came to the same conclusions by analyzing not only the crime scene, but also the case, the trial work.
Okay, well, we don't. The book that Magnini brought his own personal bias to the case.
Yes.
So if you could explain that, because when we looked at the headlines in the case, and that means headlines that were in Italy, but also the British tabloids, which are notorious for sort of their screaming headlines, and if we could take a look at some of those, they were about Foxy Knoxy, about her basically having a scarlet letter on her chest, that she was loose, that she was sexually promiscuous, and that she was also involved in all kinds of different, menage a trois and satanic worship and relationships.
Lies.
As I said, what they did to her character was worse than what they did to the evidence. This girl worked 3 jobs to get enough money to go overseas. She wasn't late to work, she never got fired, she was a good employee, and she paid her way there. In high school, they created an award for compassion that they didn't have before, and I talked to her teachers and I said, why did you do that? They said, because Amanda needed to get that award and we didn't have one. We created one for her.
And when you say needed, in other words, she deserved that award.
She deserved it just by the kindness she showed to other students.
Which
they said she was
in
remarkable.
Opposite to the portrait of the woman that was internationally broadcast by the media.
Right.
But you were saying to me beforehand that that this prosecutor, the Magnini, had some issues, like religious issues.
What happened when your wife talked to him about that?
My wife and I were over there for the appeal with Amanda's family. By that time, we had met them. When I first came out on this in favor of Amanda's innocence, I didn't know a single person in the family, never spoke to anybody.
And have you ever been paid to do that?
No, I have never been paid, and I'm still in hock for the trip to Italy for the month.
But it's not that you charge them. You're doing this pro bono. You never tried to make a penny about it.
I asked them if I could help them, and I never asked for money. And in fact, I was afraid that if I took money, that people would stop listening to my voice.
Well, that's probably true.
And so rather than risk my involvement in this to be discarded, I would rather pay my entire way than to have my words discounted simply because I was after a buck. Even the money from this book is going to her legal fees. I'm not taking a dime for the book.
None of us are getting paid to do this. This is not something that we do.
We're doing it
because we want justice.
Okay, so let's get back to this then. So we've talked about Magnini, but I want to talk to you about her behavior post-arrest, which also fueled the tabloids and fueled the gossip.
Well,
there were photographs of her kissing her boyfriend. There was a referendum that she was not grieving properly if she actually cared about the death of her roommate, and therefore that she showed a callousness, and therefore she must be guilty.
Look at the picture that you have up there. That is not callousness. That's
forlorn. I mean,
what you're seeing there is her roommate has died. She's standing, I know right where that is. She's standing 20 yards from the front door of the house. She is in shock. That's her boyfriend. He is, I know both of them now. He was comforting her. That does not look like a licentious woman saying, oh my gosh, I've just killed this girl. She cried for hours at a time. The fact that she didn't cry in public should not, the fact that she had enough control that she did not cry in public should not be an indictment against her. Italian culture may expect crying in public, but you cannot go across cultural boundaries and say that simply because she didn't cry in public that she's this monster.
When We did investigations because the FBI does help in investigations around the world.
I was in Pakistan.
Right. When we were in the Middle East, for example, there are certain cultural differences, and we need to understand those in order to do a behavioral investigation. And certainly, when you see pictures of the horrendous events when a bomb blows up in Israel or in Palestine when somebody gets killed, there are definite, very public displays of just horror and emotion. A lot of times in America that doesn't happen. We don't go crying down in the middle of the street. Families tend to support each other and hide in their houses because they want to stay away from the media. This is the kind of culture that Amanda came from, not the Italian culture or any other culture.
I think to some extent in our culture, and this certainly was in evidence with Jackie Kennedy when the president died, that she was applauded for her restraint, right. That she didn't break down, and that she showed a certain amount of strength.
Right.
And I do think that there are some cultural differences.
And Amanda's German. I mean, her grandmother came from Germany. There is a certain stoicism that her family has. I know them, and she speaks all those languages: German, Italian, French, Japanese. This is a stoicism that she maintains to this day. She grieves privately. She is in pain privately. And when she's in public, she wants people
or even if you allow for her background and the fact that she's American and she's not Italian and she's not throwing herself on the grave, or
right.
I mean, there are different kinds of
pounding
funerals.
the ground.
Exactly.
With tears,
I mean, you know,
well, it's a good point.
I'm just wondering how much you look at that.
It's a factor to look at. Pre and post-offense behavior are important, and sometimes you can predict post-offense behavior. And in this kind of case, with that disorganized crime scene, what I would expect is that person responsible for that crime to have left the area immediately, to do everything they possibly can to distance themselves from that crime scene. And that is what Rudy did. But Amanda and Raphael were at the crime scene. They went to the crime scene and they called the police. That post-offense behavior says they're innocent. Not that nobody does that.
I know, because whenever you watch any of those shows, they always look in the crowd to see who's showing up for the funeral.
When you have an organized,
It's different than calling the police.
Right, but when you have an organized crime scene, when something is very organized, it means they were planning things in advance. Typically, those people will show back up because they've set in motion a way for the person to be discovered. They typically don't want to discover the body alone.
Okay.
All right? They want to have some outside person to discover the body, and then they are separated from it. Or if they're going to be the ones to discover it, there's already in place a mechanism that makes them look innocent. And so here, in this case, though, when Rudy matches the disorganized crime scene, his behavior matches that. Amanda and Raphael, their behavior does not match that.
Now let's go to discuss Rudy. And you actually wrote about this in the book, and he is the forgotten killer. But you found out certain information about him that really hasn't been publicized.
No, there's something very significant. Everybody who listens to this case, they say, why in the world would the prosecutors just go after Amanda? Why in the world would they just pick somebody to go after? That's not what they did. Rudy Gaudet, it was a known burglar in that town, a confessed burglar in that town. He stole out of a defense lawyer's office. And his MO was to throw a rock through a window. That's a beautiful plan, because if somebody's home, the lights go on and you know to leave. If nobody comes to the window, then you know, now I can get in through the window. Rudy was a known burglar. Several days, maybe a week or maybe more than a week before the Meredith Kercher murder, Rudy went to Milan and he burglarized a preschool and was captured there. Now, if I'm in the town of Perugia and I'm the police, and I have a known burglar and drug user who's in my town, and I hear he's just been caught in Milan, you know what I say? Woo, done with him. This is great. I go have a drink, okay? Except that the police in Perugia called the Milanese police and said, that guy Rudy you just picked up, give him his property back, give him his knife back, put him on a train back to Perugia.
By himself.
By himself. Why would you do that? Because the only reason, I say this to a fellow FBI agent, he's an informant. He is giving them information. He is important to the police. So here's what happens. Your informant comes back in the nightmare scenario. A week after he comes back, he slaughters an exchange student. We have a witness who says they saw a black man running away from the place. You get in there and you say, oh, he threw a rock through the window.
I think we know who this is.
Crap. So now you've got a problem, because in Italy, you'll go to jail for that. So the police, they bring Amanda in because they know that she works for one of the only other black men in town. And he runs a bar, and he's not their favorite guy. So they bring her in and they interrogate her for 53 hours in 5 days. 40-hour work week, 53 hours in 5 days. The last 8 hours start at 10 p.m. one night. They go overnight. She is slapped if she doesn't give the right answer. She's given no water, no coffee, no food, no nothing. She begs to go to the bathroom because it's a bad time of the month for her. They will not let her up from the table, and every time she gives them an answer they don't want, they slap her. And they keep her awake all night by putting 2 detectives in every hour. That's a technique. Soft torture, really. And so what happens is interrogations end for 2 reasons. You either get what you want or you give up. Those are the only 2 reasons an interrogation will end. At the end of the interrogation, they got a signed statement from her, which means they got what they want. And do you know what it said? It didn't say, I, Amanda Knox, was involved in the crime. They didn't want her. They didn't need her to be involved in the crime. They said, I, Amanda Knox, after all this beating and have a cloudy recollection that I'm unsure of, that my boss went into that room. Ba-ching, you got your black man going into the room. You've got a witness now. You're off the hook. Rudy isn't caught.
So you're not responsible for bringing back a killer into the town.
And then
well, you're not responsible for you're not responsible for that murder.
And when it turns out it is actually Rudy, then what do? They quietly deal with him, get him off the charts, and make this huge international splash about this evil she-devil, Amanda Knox. So it's clearly a hatchet job against Amanda, and it's absolutely false.
When Rudy is in Germany, they monitored a Skype conversation with a friend of his. The Italian police did. And he said, Amanda wasn't there. Raphael wasn't there. It was just me. But they bring him back to prison after 2 weeks. He comes out, and while they're trying to get Amanda a life sentence, they agree to a 16-year sentence for him. He goes on a fast-track trial, and guess when he's out? Last month. And they're still going after